Right. Right. Let's kind of switch gears to,
Sure.
how do you think, we're talking about swim lessons and saving lives and, the beginnings of the sport. What do you think that young people, the young athletes, what do they really need to learn when they're 6, 7, 8, both on land and in the water?
hmm Well, I mean, if we're going to go back to water safety and some stuff like that, I mean, I think, in the community that I grew up in, outside of Monroeville, in a place called Garden City, and we had a pretty mixed um, racial community there. And where I grew up in the east, every neighborhood has a community pool in it, and the pool is a very popular place to be. Swimming was a very popular thing to do, and our little summer league team was a very popular thing. I think that the younger that you become comfortable around the edges of the water, it just makes a super huge difference. So I know in our community, because the swim team in the summer was such a popular thing to do, and my father made it so it was so affordable, almost $0 to be able to do it in the summer. It was an introduction to a lot of people. And I think that those things have like a compounding effect. So, getting involved in your local community as far as the summer leagues go and that type of stuff, if that's available, that changes everything. And being able to find a place where you can get quality teaching from a swim school that has a funnel or has a way into some team swimming, I think that that is the best grassroots method still going that I see for being successful in the sport is honestly really, really good experience around the introduction to water and water safety. So I don't know, maybe I went a little too far back on that answering that question, but that's how I feel as a, having been being a swim coach for 20 years.
So we take our people when they get in the water, and they talk about being able to float and
Mhm,
kick and
mhm,
roll and reach. And then we kind of do the similar stuff on land with crawling and moving and awareness, running, skipping, throwing, hopping,
mhm.
jumping, right? So, do you see the parallels between being able to move your body on land at a young age, and then how can that help them become better athletes in the water and more and maybe adaptable or easier to learn how to move better in the water? Do you see that correlation?
I mean, I would like to say that I see a direct correlation in there, and I'd say sometimes you definitely do see a direct correlation between someone who's a better athlete on land and someone who can move. There is definitely some, I would say, mystery or almost magical ability of some people when they get into the fluid, they move like a water-based animal. They move like a fish. They move like a squid. They can just flow with the water. Water flows and they flow. And it's it's a very natural, when you look, it appears to be natural. The only thing natural about water and a human is that we're born in embryonic fluid, and our first thing is to come out of water. And we're swimming in embryonic fluid for 9 months. So our first experience as a sentient being is inside fluid. If you drop a newborn child in the water, they'll paddle their hands and feet around because they just swam around for 9 months. But that's not how we evolved. And that's not how we were born, unless you go back to vertebrate morphology when we came out as lizards. But I would say that there's a correlation to kids who move well and kids who can swim well because they can make shapes. And kids who can make shapes and solve problems on land, they make shapes and solve problems in the water. And that's really the foundation of all of this, is being able to make all the shapes in the water and do it over and over and over again repetitively. And kids who have a robust movement vocabulary on land end up being able to solve the problems in the water the same way. But like I said, there's a lot of the water gifted kids who never move that well on land. But if you can make them 1% better on land, it appears to be an exponential increase in durability, less injuries, things like that. But if you were to boil it down to skills, you might say squat, lunge, push, pull, brace, and rotate on land. And then from there, you would have, sport-specific foundational skills: run, kick, throw, hit, hold, grab, those things like that. And then you might have water-specific skills that are very similar to that, which might be float, scull, roll, flow, things like that. And then you would think about that in more stroke-specific: kick, pull, recover, flip, dive, things like that. So I think that there's definitely, you can draw a pathway, but since it's not necessarily a straight line pathway, I mean, you can get off track pretty quick, or there can be people, it doesn't necessarily become a linear progression from perfect land skills to water skills.
Yeah, I just think there's a high correlation, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. So you take, like, how do you get somebody better? Like, what would be an example of someone getting better on land and then having that correlation be to the water? I mean, I have a few ideas, but I'm interested to hear you. I mean, you do a lot of stuff between, like, oh, we're going to do this shape and then we're going to do this drill.
Mhm. I think, one of the things that I see, and this is just off the top of my head, because I do think about this a decent amount, the few that I see that seem to bear fruit is really someone who has really poor thoracic flexion and extension, and helping someone increase their range of motion and their thoracic flexion and extension, but looking at it from a total kinetic chain. So from fingernails, maybe all the way down to their hip, and being able to get them to move a little bit better in that area translates. I've seen it translate from, just a few degrees extra flexion and extension into from a butterfly that's really pretty pedestrian to near national caliber key positions in the catch and in the first kick, second kick, wrists dry, hips high position. So you can you can very easily take some mobility positions like that and make it. I would also say I've seen people translate overhead squatting with a broomstick and doing some things like that to being able to get a much better plant position on the wall in flip turning within a single session. Some of the stuff looks like magic in a single session. It really does, but it's not. Just body awareness and kinesthetic awareness.
Yeah, I think that's the key there, is like that kinesthetic awareness. And actually, it might be easier to manipulate somebody to make a change on land, but you kind of want that light bulb to go off between, oh, this is what it's supposed to feel like in the pool.
Yeah.
Well,
the only way to do that is through integrated awareness. The only way to do that is to have your programs integrated. If your weight room or wherever you choose to do athletic development is a separate piece of what you do, and you're doing that away from the pool, it's in my opinion and what I see with a lot of the research, with skill acquisition, skill development, it also seems to fall in line with fascia manipulation, mobility work, the nervous system. And if you can do that work integrated into a session, which is what we try to do at Gain and what a lot of the clubs do, which is mobilizing, strengthening, lengthening on land, and then putting it into the pool and making sure there's a clean, progressive intent with how you do it in the water, and then doing it again, climbing out on land again, taking a look at where the restrictions might be, or where where land postures are going to relate to the water postures, and immediately doing it in the water intra workout as part of the practice seems to be the best place for, this type of thing to happen. Not that it doesn't happen from the weight room to the water, but it certainly isn't fast. And sometimes it seems to be even, random if you're able to keep those ideas. It doesn't seem to have a good land to water connection or good, what people might call, transfer of skill transfer.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things I've seen too is just that breaststroke change, being able to overhead squat, the hip. Um, talk about how important that mobility of the hip and what you can acquire on land to having that equal to like better breaststroke.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one thing we did wrong maybe in the 70s and 80s, and I'd have to take a closer look at this, but they
Just one thing in the wrong in 70s and 80s.
Yeah, well, probably. I'm just specifically about breaststroke. They did a lot right, man. They did a lot right.
Yeah.
No one ever likes to talk about that. Focus too much on the knees. If you go up the kinetic chain, stable, mobile, the ankle mobility and hip mobility. If you can get a couple degrees out of your hip, remember how that couple degrees in the hip of freedom translates all the way down to the distal, down to the foot. I mean, that can create just enough that you can become, you can go to world-class level key positions in breaststroke with unlocking the hip mobility. And, the greater hip mobility you have, the less lower back injuries you have, which tends to be a place where swimmers take hits, is in the lower back. And it seems to also relieve knee pain. Same thing with the ankle, being able to have your big toe be a little bit more flexible and mobile, and having your ankle function, not only be a flexible joint, but also have great, what Vern might call most stability, the best combination of stability and mobility together. I mean, that makes a huge difference. And we're not going to end up with all these, I work with a world-class, I work at the USA Swim Academy in Fort Collins with Susan Vonderlippe, formerly Sue Rapp, who's Olympic gold and silver medalist in breaststroke. And, the knees on our breaststroke legends, they're not so great. And I think that we're getting past that because we're understanding that the hip has a much larger role to play in what's happening in breaststroke kick.
Yeah, those are great points. I want to kind of get back to the relationship side of things here. You've worked, obviously now you're involved in Gain. You're working with a lot of coaches. You've been on a lot of pool decks. You've seen some of the best. So what are maybe 2 or 3 commonalities you've seen from the great coaches across the country? And I know you've worked with even some in the world.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I mean, I'd like to say that when I go there, I start writing down, always taking notes or, looking for that. There are definitely some people who are super curious, and they're always looking for these. I mean, you can go into the bookstore and it's filled with, diagnoses or the 5 keys of great leaders. And my opinion is that most of these people who run great programs and are great coaches, they have a particular skill. And just not to be redundant on the conversation that we've had, but they're damn good at a handful of things. And
Limited, would you say?
I said they're damn good at a handful of things.
I know, but would you say that it would be like they're great at a small amount? Or yeah. Okay.
They appear to be absolute savants in a few areas, whether it's relationships or whether it's physiology or whether it's, organization or whatever it is. They appear to be absolutely better than anybody else in those handful of things. And they've done a fantastic job of creating programs around their strengths. And sometimes they've complemented themselves well, sometimes they haven't complemented themselves well. It's typically when their staffs or whatever's going on is not very complimentary, they seem to struggle. And when they have that formula right, they do a fantastic job. The other thing I'd like to say, every one of the head coaches that I've seen at successful programs, that it's all about teamwork and it's all about this. And frankly, it's just different. I feel like the people who are successful, they know what they're good at and they do it. And they're unapologetically passionate about what they do, unapologetically passionate and unapologetically hardworking, ferociously working towards a goal. They always have a vision of what their programs, what they want their program to be, and they know what they don't want their program to be. And they're always unapologetically moving towards that, and however it is, they're using that tool to have people gravitate towards them and, get the job done. Some of it's through relationships, some of it's through great training, some of it's through, a bunch of different ways. Not everyone gets it done the same, and I don't think everyone likes to necessarily hear that answer, but, there are some smart people out there who work really hard, and it still comes down to how much do you know, and how much time and effort are you willing to put into this. And there's a lot of people who have a high threshold for hard work, and they're putting in a lot of time.
There's no substitute for hard work, is there, Chris?
Well, no, but I guess the smarter you are, that the less you have to. There are some hard, realities in any profession that you're in, and I'd like to say that if I got up and spoke at a lecture, that that you'd be able to say, oh yeah, we're just lucky to be here, and I'm so happy and so blessed, and use all the humble pieces of this, and that's how you want to, if you want to have a respectful and very congenial conversation with people. That's how you want to start, because that's a value that you want to. Being humble is a value that you want to be able to project. But some of the sharp swords of truth that poke you in your side are a couple things. One, some of the people who stand up and lecture, and are some of the greats, they've put themselves in a position where athletes will land in their lap. But that's a skill. The skill was that they knew how to put themselves in position to get great athletes. Some of them aren't even that great at coaching, but their skill is to put themselves and stay in a position, put themselves in it, stay in it, and always be receiving that. And that's a skill. The other thing is, look, some people are just smarter, and they're better at this. And sometimes I feel like if you stand up in a lecture and you just say, well, we're really lucky and we worked hard. Sometimes I just say, BS, man. I'm up here because I dedicated my entire life to this. I made sure that I learned more than anybody else could possibly learn to be up here. And sometimes that's the reality. And you're going to have to look at it and say, well, if I want to stand up there and give the lecture instead of receiving one, I'm going to have to take a hard look at my skills and make sure that I'm putting in serious amounts of effort to wherever my strengths are, so that I can get there. So every once in a while, I think that we do a disservice to people by being diplomatic about how we got where we got, because everybody has to get there a different way, and pretending it's always just hard work or humble. Well, some people just, someone who's motivated and has an IQ of 6 billion, it's going to be a little easier for them to figure some of the stuff out than me. So I knew I had to work harder because I wasn't as smart.
Well, I think you're selling yourself a little bit short there, but I get what you're saying. It's kind of like in Wheel of Fortune, they give you RST, LNE, right? And let's get past, hey, we know you're humble, and give me give me past those reasons why you're good, or give us the real stuff, right?
Yeah. I mean, give me the real stuff. Give me the dirty stuff. And,
Yeah.
Inside the Sports Gene was that David Epstein's book. I mean, that's one of the first times I've read that. And one of the first times I've read this. When I read that, it was so refreshing because everybody, and some of this might come from the self-esteem movement, which we know is a failure. Self-confidence is the most important thing. Self-esteem is like a straw man, just kind of hanging there, in the wind. A lot of that's like a lot of the books like talent is overrated and talent is never enough, and they say that stuff. And that's a lot. Those are great feel good, try hard stories. But same thing with the athletes, as we know, the dirty secret with the athletes is nothing beats genetics. Having the high level of genetics, it's impossible to beat. And the same thing is true in coaching. If you get someone who has the right predispositions for being great at coaching, whether it be the hard work or whatever it is, those are things that you can't necessarily overcome without working tremendously hard in the areas that you're good at. That's like a tough pill to swallow. But, if you're going to think that someone's predisposed to only being able to sleep for 3 hours and they can work for like 21 hours a day, and, because there are people there's a small percentage of people who only need between 3 and 5 hours of sleep a day, but it is very short. But what happens is you go onto Twitter, or you go on this and you see Jocko Willink, and he's up at 3:30 in the morning, and you're like, well, I have to do that. And it's like, it's just not going to be that way. It's like you get this FOMO, or you see these incredible people and you try to emulate certain pieces of them, but that's not you. That's not your individual signature. So it's like you got to find your way to the top. So sometimes when we try to emulate these leaders, it's not realistic. It's not realistic.
Well, I'm going to push back a little bit. I think that the challenge there is it might not be realistic in the time frame that you want it to be. And I would agree there are some certainly genetic predispositions where somebody maybe in music or swimming or, basketball, you're going to have to, the average height is a certain way, but we can all learn the characteristics from people, but you have to also apply a certain timeline to it. And it just doesn't happen overnight. And I think you have to give yourself an appropriate amount of consistency, like we talked about, to learn. And I think there's also a little bit of a paradigm shift in terms of, because at the same time it used to be, oh, well, that person just is that good naturally. So I think there's a balance there between like saying, oh, they're 6'10", of course they're going to be, the best basketball player in the world, but we know that's not the case either. So there's, I think, a balance there.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is. I mean, I'm not going to say that I'm some kind of like biological determinist or something like that. There's definitely room in the nurture side of things. Like I said, I have a very strong belief in my 4S system, which is self-confidence, self-awareness, self-reliance, and self-acceptance. And it's in that order, for the reason that self-confidence is on the top of the pyramid. But a lot of stuff comes down to, confidence, awareness, because there's a lot of wiggle room in life. Once from the time you're born to the time you die, there's a lot of wiggle room, to make change and make things happen. I believe in that, and my pushback isn't that, my push isn't that there isn't hope and there isn't things that we can change. There's a very popular book that people are fans of, and the name of the book, and even I was a fan of it, and I'm still kind of a fan of it conceptually, which is Carol Dweck's book called Mindset.
Yeah.
Everyone's a very big believer in a lot of that stuff, and coaches especially, swim coaches, track coaches. But there's a dirty little secret, and I'll go on record as saying this. No one was able to recreate any of the experiments that Carol did. None of them have been able to be reproduced. And they've tried to reproduce those experiments multiple times. No one has ever been able to reproduce those. So as far as that book is concerned, there's no scientific consensus that any of the things that she wrote in that book are correct. So that's what I would just say,
All right, you heard it here.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of people who've pushed back against that research. Like I said, and I'm not saying that those conceptually about growth mindset and fixed mindsets, they're not great concepts. And it's not like you want to, like I said, it's not like you don't want to teach those ideas. I just don't want, for me, I don't want anybody to think that, well, if I try hard enough, I can do anything in the world. Well, you're probably not jumping over the Empire State Building. No matter, that's why I talk about self-awareness, how aware of you, and you're better off with, the concepts of self-confidence, self-awareness, self-reliance, and self-acceptance, because those help you move towards your goals where you are in this current environment where, everyone gets to see how high the mountain is now, with social media, those FOMO concepts and things like that. I think that people can become discouraged with their individual places in the pantheon of ideas and things you're supposed to be able to do. Being comfortable in your own skin and knowing where you want to go and how you're going to get there, and being aware of where you're strong and where you're not is important. I don't know. I'm just rambling now.
No, it's been great. I've enjoyed this conversation. We're going to finish with some fun, fast questions.
Okay.
Maybe they won't be fast, but to wrap this up, if you could pick anybody in history, and we're assuming that they can kick, who would you like to do a social kick with?
Assuming they can kick.
We're gonna make that assumption. That
alive or dead?
Yep. Anybody.
Marcus Aurelius.
Okay. What song would you least like to pop up during workout?
Golden Earring, Radar Love.
Deep end or shallow end?
Shallow.
Perfect I am order.
Wow. It is the perfect I am. It is perfect.
Okay. Kickboard or no kickboard?
No kickboard.
Would you rather be in a pool that's too warm or too cold?
Too cold.
First or last in the lane?
Last.
And what would be your favorite Gatorade or Powerade flavor?
Oh, that's easy. Gatorade had this flavor called Citrus Cooler forever.
Oh, yeah.
It's the best. It's the best.
It's the best. Thanks, Chris. This has been a lot of fun. Anything you want to end with today?
No, I'd just say thanks for having me on the podcast. If you're looking for more information about Gain, you can find us at thegainnetwork.com/swimming. You can find us on social media. Just type in Gain Swim. You'll find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn. We're going to be having a clinic right here in Carmel, Indiana, coming this September 10th through the 12th. There'll be more information coming out about that this very week. And, like I said, follow your 4 S's: self-confidence, self-awareness, self-reliance, and self-acceptance. And you can't go wrong in life. And for you other squiggles out there, keep on moving.
Keep on moving. All right. Thanks, Chris.
Yep.